Applying hatching in gCADPlus designs can sometimes be a little tricky, and I'd like to use this diagram from a group in Wales just to illustrate how, if you take it steadily, it's relatively easy to do, but there can be some complications. If we say we want to do some hatching over this area here, I'll just select it. It's a polyline, so it's one entity, and we can apply hatching. So let's go Draw and Hatch. We pick a pattern, and there are lots of patterns. gCADPlus uses the AutoCAD hatch pattern system, and there are lots and lots of these on the internet. We've gathered together some interesting ones that we think might be useful in landscape work, and one of them is called Gaia 3, there's a Gaia 4 and so on, so I've set that as my hatch pattern. Now gCADPlus gives you a couple of opportunities here. We want to hatch that to create a gravel impression. We could pick a point or select an entity. I'll illustrate in a moment over here how you go about picking points and how that can get tricky. But for the moment, we'll select an entity. We know that this is a polyline entity, and we know that it's filled. It doesn't have a border color yet, but we've picked that entity. So down here in the command line, gCADPlus is telling me I have found one entity. It's a polyline. If we go up here and look, and if I hit now the Enter key, we come back to our hatch pattern. Now, it's a really good idea when you are hatching to start with a scale that's relatively large. To illustrate, I'll start with a scale of 500, and the figure I try and look at is that density figure. I like to see it around 2, 3, 4, 5 to start with, so we'll say OK. And can you see the hatching is applied? It's applied in the colour that's current. That's this a sandy colour, and we get a reasonable result, although we have to play around a little, perhaps with selecting this entity here. That's picked up the fact that it's also hatched, and it's hatched at a scale of 100 rather than the scale that we used before on this hatching. So there's actually hatching on top of hatching. So what we really want to do, and this is 500, so if we pick this one here, and notice that the 3 circles have been hatched as one entity. Well, we don't have a tool in gCADPlus that will enable us to take that internal hatching from those 3 hatched circles and shuffle the order and move it in relation to the coarser hatching so that we get the right sort of effect. Because hatching is not, it's one single entity. It doesn't have within it opaqueness. We do have a solid hatch, but I digress. What I would do here, I think, is just change the scale of the, if you like, external pattern, and then we'll unselect all there. I'll just zoom out a little, and I think that illustrates that the hatching in those circles is denser. And that's about the best we can do as far as indicating different forms of hatching that actually overlay one another. There was another option in the hatch pattern. Repeat hatch. We've been dealing with selecting an entity, and that worked well. There is a pick point option which sometimes can be handy, but you do need to be aware of how it's operating. If I click, I've got a circle inside of a curve fit polyline. I'll just back out of there and we'll pick this outer one. That's a polyline, and we've applied a quadratic B-spline curve fit to it. And the inner one is a circle, so there are 2 entities there. if we repeat the hatch and we say pick a point, what gCADPlus does is radiates out from the point that I picked and makes an extra boundary. I'll just cancel from there and move away. So if I now drag over there, sorry, let's try that again. Repeat the hatch, pick a point inside there, and if I then hit enter, I get an opportunity to hatch in there. So let's set that at our lower value of 100, and it hatches nicely. But if I zoom in there and remove the hatch, delete it, can you see I've got two entities now? gCADPlus has made a new boundary mimicking the circle. So if I delete it, I get back to where we were with a circle. So it's a little bit tricky. It can help when you've got unusual shapes like this. So hatch, let's pick a point there. gCADPlus makes that boundary, and then pick here, makes another boundary, and then we say hatch it. It'll get that outer zone. So it can be really very, very handy. But you do need to be aware that gCADPlus is making new entities as it does so. I'm just trying to pick them to illustrate. Let me zoom in here. Yes, there's the new boundary that's made. You can see it's got lots and lots and lots of vertices in there. That can pump the size of the drawing up. But once the hatching's done and we delete it, we get back to the original. So I've just removed the two new boundaries that gCADPlus generated. So complex, tricky, but if you understand it, it can be a very powerful feature. Now, in a drawing as complex as this, I think gCADPlus would find it fairly difficult to find and sort of repeat this type